Hi everyone, I'm your host Ashley Krez, and thanks for joining us on It's All Millennial. Here we discuss important topics relating to a large segment of our population, better known as Generation Y. On today's show, we are talking about the L word, love and relationships. And here with us to share their thoughts is Natalie Senko, a business graduate, and Brad Wilton, an individual and couples therapist with Marno Chappelle. Thanks for joining me, you two.
Thanks for having us.
It's one of these stimulating topics, right? Love and relationships and, experiences Gen Ys have. I think overall that, our generation really has been reared on technology and choice as well, right? With those two components, those two variables, why wouldn't we want to test a lifelong relationship first before moving forward and committing, full time? So let's really delve into how millennials are defining forever, right? There was a 2007 study done by the University of Denver that found that out of the 800 individuals between the ages of 20 and 30 in relationships for 2 months or longer, 93% of them had been sexually active at the time they were interviewed. Okay, so there's our information. About half those people interviewed said that they had sex with their relationship partner before the relationship was exclusive. With that, it seems that it's become sort of the acceptable norm of Gen Yers to become intimately involved with somebody before the official relationship, or that even before the relationship has become exclusive, right? Let's delve and let's unravel that a little bit more. Brad, maybe you can share your thoughts a little bit about that.
It's interesting. It's I guess it's the society we've crafted. It's how we all grow up. Everybody since our age and younger has had the internet, and we always talk about faster, better, quicker, and of course the pornification of society, and so there's just this instant gratification mentality.
Yeah.
And it's gone from even 20 years ago when there was at least some apprehension when we were watching Degrassi Junior High or whatever else, to where now it's just assumed. And of course, at the same time, people are disinhibited, but also there's a real reduction in the risk concerning it, because a lot less issues around unwanted pregnancies or STIs. So I think it's sort of confluence of a lot of factors where here we are.
Yeah. No, I think you've made some good points just in terms of the instant gratification and how things, I guess, have become normalized a little bit more with society, media, and how things are portrayed as well. Anything to add, Natalie, from your perspective?
I think sex is such a huge part of a relationship that it's good to sort of test it out before you become exclusive with that person. There's obviously a right time and place to do that, but if you find that you're sexually compatible with them, then maybe you'll tie down with them and stay with them for a while.
Yeah, no, it's finding the balance. Now, we're saying that things have evolved, that our generation is more sexually active perhaps, or just more willing to be intimately involved with somebody before the formal commitment. Is there anything wrong with it?
I don't think so. I think it's kind of become the norm now. Everyone's doing it. People are doing it at a younger age. It's just times have changed. I don't think that it's wrong.
Do you think that there are any elements that have been added or missing? One thing I guess I'm thinking of is with intimacy, our emotions, right, and feelings when you're connected with somebody else in that manner. Is the love as strong? Is the love as strong, as it used to be? Are we even able to identify that?
That's an open-ended question.
Sure.
I don't know that any of us can speak on that definitively, but I know it's true that, not so long ago, I think in our lifetime, we can remember a time where sex was reserved for someone special. Dare we say L word, love them.
Yeah.
We've decided to sort of disconnect those two, and and so they no longer function in tandem the way they used to.
I think we could probably talk for a long time about this, but let's move on. So, along the lines of dating, the traditional gender roles, right? The rules of engagement for dating. It seems like they're either evolving or that they're dying out in terms of guys paying for meals or opening the doors, or ladies staying at home cooking meals for when their spouse comes home. As well, defining relationships seem to me more difficult than ever. I know I find in my coaching practice where a lot of people are asking, am I in a relationship because I've been intimate with this person? If he's dating somebody else, what happens? So, do you think that society is moving away from traditional gender roles?
I think we're at an interesting cross-section, or intersection maybe would be a better way to put it. I think we've sort of arrived at this midway point where over the last couple of decades you pitch in here too, let me know if you agree with this, but we've, especially for women, with the feminist movement, we've decided that we don't want the traditional roles. That doesn't fit anymore. But what are we going to have in place of that? Are women just going to move into what was traditionally the men's sphere and be the breadwinner and be the caretaker and do everything? Or do they still want to retain some of the former role? I've got a lot of clients coming in these days who are millennial or kind of half a generation older, where now they're kind of knocking on 40 or even mid-30s, and they're starting to call themselves post-feminists.
Oh, okay.
And they're starting to talk about how they grew up feminist and then realized that wasn't quite the deal they wanted, and they wanted to kind of salvage, I think is the right word.
Balance it, maybe?
That's maybe a better word too. Some of what their grandmothers had.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what, Natalie, any last minute thoughts from you in terms of the gender roles? Is it true? Is it that women are coming back wanting a little bit more of what our grandparents have? One thought.
I honestly feel that now with the equality of women, a lot of women are more focused on career. They're less focused on having families and their relationships and just going for their career. I'm going
to have to cut you off. I'm so sorry. We'll keep talking more. Stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to finish our discussions and talk a little bit more about Gen Y and marriage. Keep watching. welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were talking about millennials and dating and how gender roles have evolved from past generations. Here with us today is Natalie Senko, a business major, and Brad Wilton, a individual and couples therapist with Morneau Chappelle. Thanks again, guys, for joining me. So, before the break, really we are unraveling gender roles and how they've evolved over the years. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about marriage and those next steps, right? So I think as a whole, millennials really are less enthusiastic about marriage than older generations, where, decades ago it was quite normal for somebody to get married in their late 20s, in some cases even their late teens, right? Today, really it's, millennials or Gen Ys are postponing marriage well into their late 20s and early 30s. Natalie, maybe you can share some of your thoughts with us with why that is.
Yeah, I mean, my parents were already married by the time they were my age. I feel nowhere close to being ready. There's so many factors that can go into that. Technology may be a huge one with the internet and different sites like Tinder and all that. I mean, maybe women are more focused on their social networks, spending more time with their friends, going out, traveling. I mean, there's so many different reasons why we're holding off. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think necessarily you're at your prime and you've grown when you're in your 30s and you've found yourself. So maybe it's better for us to get married later in life.
I really like those points. One thing I'm thinking of is, the availability of choice, right? With technology, perhaps there is more choice rather than, the people in the small town that you grew up in. But then as well, what you were saying, Natalie, with setting our priorities, right? So as women, we have, made the decision to, become more educated perhaps in less generations and focus more on our careers so that it's not so much on the forefront. Again, this is a generalization. There are people who still get married young today and have children young today. But overall, Brad, what are your thoughts as a counselor?
Well, I have a lot of interesting conversations with a lot of people on this, and I don't think there's a definitive answer. It's just a question of now we have sort of broken free from a lot of the conventional or traditional expectations. So now it's wide open. Now it's an open playing field. Now you got to chart your own path, decide what you want. There's a lot of stuff you can do growing up, especially in your 20s. Now that I'm out of my 20s, I got a lot of friends who I've stayed in touch with, and we all had wildly different experiences from each other. One of my best friends is in Tokyo. I got a lot of good friends, not a lot, I got a handful of good friends in Europe. I got friends all over Canada. And that just covers traveling, people in different relationships.
Yeah.
There's so much to do. There's so much that we feel compelled to do. Education. A lot more women are focusing on that as a means to career.
Yeah.
It all just takes time.
Yeah.
And so if you're gonna spend time on these things, then the relationship has to kind of get threaded into that, and it just takes longer, I think.
Sure, for sure. So it really sounds like it's more about a fine-tuning, understanding more of what you want as an individual, man or woman, and what's of value to do and what's of value to you and what's a priority as well. And just leading your life that way, right?
Yeah, I just find myself saying over and over again, do whatever you want, just make sure that's really what you want. Make sure you're intentional about the choices you're making so that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll be happy where you got.
I like that point. Be intentional about what you're doing and also not living with regret, I think, as well, right? Along those lines, I found some stats here. So the average age of a marrying man is 31.1. The average age for a marrying woman is 29.1 years old. The highest really it's ever been in Canada. In terms of those numbers, your thoughts, generally speaking, do you see that those numbers will be changing over the next few years, increasing or decreasing?
I don't know. I think that's a good age. I completely feel fine saying that that's the right age to get married. Yeah. I feel even you can go older than that. I think your 20s are sort of to find yourself and settle down later on.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a lot of literature out these days about how adolescence is being extended further and further in the 20s, even age 30. The the brain isn't done growing until age 25.
Sure.
At least.
Yeah.
We're not as good at making good decisions. I know
Life choices.
I don't think any men out there under 30 are really fit for marriage. Not totally ready. Some women are, a lot aren't either. It's just,
Sure.
This is kind of what it's come to. It's a lot of different factors. Another one I'll just quickly mention is the idea of getting married is no longer tied quite so closely to the idea of living together and starting a family. So I think consequently what we're seeing is people do get married around age 31, 29, whatever.
Yeah.
But maybe they've already been living together 5-6 years with a couple kids.
Yeah. And that's that's the next, or the other part of it as well, is that cohabitation, right? So in Canada, when you're cohabitating with somebody, it is in some sense equivalent to that official marriage certificate, right? Is cohabitation more comfortable for people? Is it the commitment without the commitment? Any thoughts on that? Brad, Natalie?
I think sometimes it just makes sense to live with someone financially, or I mean, it's not really a big deal anymore. I think people are doing it more and more without being married.
It's definitely become more normal. I think we're seeing just a reflection of the example set by the parents. Since the divorce rate peaked in 1980-81, it has been coming down, but I think in part that's because fewer people do get married, and the ones who do are being intentional. So that's a good thing. But on the other hand, more people are opting out and not wanting to be committed because they're thinking about, should I marry my boyfriend or girlfriend right when mom and dad are, should I marry my hot new yoga instructor or whatever? So there's a less clear signal being sent by the previous generation as far as what's the right step.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? We could talk forever about dating and marriage, but that's all the time we have for now. Keep watching, and when we come back after the break, we're going to move to the next level, millennials and having children. Keep watching. back to the show. We're here today with Natalie, Senko, and Brad Wilton talking about millennials and dating, millennials and marriage, and now we're really going to expose more of our thoughts on millennials and having children. Welcome back, you two. So, we've really uncovered more about some of our thoughts on millennials and dating, millennials and marriage. In terms of Gen Ys having children, the number of young women planning on having children have dropped from 78% to 42% in the last 20 years, according to an author, Stuart Friedman, at the University of Pennsylvania. So, that's a pretty big percentage drop, right? 78 to 42. Why do you think that is? Natalie?
As you mentioned earlier, women are more focused on education and their career now. Mm-hmm. I think having kids is really put on the back burner, maybe to the point where it could be too late. They're finished, doing themselves that they just didn't have a chance to have kids or didn't even think about having kids, or maybe didn't get a chance to find someone right to have kids with.
Yeah. No, I have some peers and people that I've met throughout my life through networking and whatnot, and that's sort of another thing as well. It's just finding that person that you feel compatible with to be able to move on to the next phase of having children with them. Any experiences or any thoughts from you that you want to share, Brad?
I think that's an interesting stat. I'd be interested to look that up. I'm curious to know what the age group is that they were sampling and how big a sample. I think there's probably a lot of truth in that, and I think those views change over time. I think that just my own experience talking to a lot of clients is that they came out of university really amped up. I'm going to build my career. I'm going to get the corner office, and then 10 years flies by, and they're in the corner office, and then they go home alone.
Yes, yeah.
And then now they're 35 and now they do want a baby, and so they start looking around, figuring out how to make that's going to happen. And it's a problem. I think that's when the number creeps back up to 78.
Yeah. Sorry to.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say one thing that I've heard as well from clients or whatnot was that it's really hard to meet somebody. Right? So, yes, dating preferences have evolved, marriage preferences have evolved and changed a little bit, but finding that right person where, yes, we're connected all the time through social media and the internet, but is that the same level of connection that we had a generation ago when, we would hang out with our friends on the streets, or we would have, barbecues? And I'm not saying that doesn't happen now, but with everyone texting all the time, does that take away some of the human elements, which makes it less personable?
It's qualitatively different.
Sure.
We all have phones that we never use for airtime. We just send messages.
Yeah.
And we're constantly online. Everybody who's dating is dating online. Now I feel old. When I was doing my thesis back in 04-05, that's what I was looking into, this online dating thing. It's a new idea. Oh. Somebody named Sherry Turkle over at MIT wrote some really interesting research on how we experience each other and even how we experience ourselves differently online versus offline.
Yeah.
And when you begin to experience the world and certainly relationships through only online, it just doesn't develop the same way. It doesn't develop as organically as you do when you just spend time together in a room, face to face, brain to brain. Absolutely,
yeah. That's one thing that I would talk to you about my clients, just in terms of getting out there and putting yourself in a place where you can meet Mr. Right or Mrs. Right, just in terms of meetup groups, get involved in Parks and Rec. But as you said, Brad, right, the face-to-face time really gives you that connection that you can get to know somebody to weed out the good and the bad, right? We sort of got off topic a bit. I guess more about children. Yes, women do have more options, and we are focusing on our development, our careers, and paying off debts, whatever it might be. So in one sense, women have more options where they may not feel that they have a deadline, so to speak, but there's also that underlying theme of, I also have a deadline, right, where, I don't want to have kids too much later in life. But I guess in the look of things, it looks like women really aren't becoming mothers until their 30s or their 40s. As a woman, Natalie, do you think it's smart for women having children later in life, or does it decrease your chances for various health problems?
I mean, my mom had me when she was 35, and I'm fine.
Yes.
But I mean, I have a kid when you can have it. I don't think you should put a timeline on yourself. I mean, if it's not the right time, don't do it. But if you can have it when you're 40, then go for it. With the birth problems, I would just kind of, hope for the best. I don't know exactly what the statistics are for birth problems later in life, having children, but I mean, I think it's fine.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like just, being more assured with what you want as a person rather than feeling societal pressure to follow the norm of what everybody else is doing, right? So I think maybe that's an overall theme, is just beating to the path of your own drum and just figuring out what you want in that way. Any last thoughts, for our guests in terms of having children and, whether we delay it or start now?
I'm a parent. I'm a big fan of kids.
Yeah.
I've also figured out that you need at least two, because otherwise they don't play together, and then you never, ever have another moment in your life.
Yeah.
Having said that, you have to be ready. You have to be ready for it to be exponentially harder than you ever imagined. You have to be excited about that. And if you're not, then you should wait.
Sure. No, that's fantastic. How about you, Natalie?
I think that kids are great, and when you find the right person to have kids with, whatever time it may be, you should do it.
Yeah. Well, you both summarized it really well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Well, for more information on our show and our guests, please check out itsallmillennial.tv. Stay tuned for our next show when we talk more about what millennials want out of work. Thanks for watching.